מזמור לדוד. אדוני רואי לא אחסר, בינות אשר ירביצן ימי מנוחות ינחלני, נפשי שובב, ינחני במגלי צדק למען שמו. גם כי אלך בגיא מוות, לא אירא רע, כי אתה עמדי. שבטך ומשענתך המה ינחמוני. תערוך לפני שולחן נגד צורריי. דשנת ושמן ראשי, כוסי רוויה, אך טוב וחסד ירדיפוני כל ימי חיי, ושבתי בבית אדוני לאורך ימים. Friends, I've shared with you the words of our 23rd Psalm. In these moments when we are in need of comfort, when we are searching for strength, we often turn to the psalmist. And so I invite you to recite these words with me as we say together, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He guideth me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of my enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil. My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever." In the rising of the sun and in its going down, we will remember him. In the blowing of the wind and in the chill of winter, we will remember him. In the opening buds and in the rebirth of spring, we will remember him. In the blueness of sky and in the warmth of summer, we will remember him. In the rustling of leaves and in the beauty of autumn, we will remember him. In the beginning of the year and when it ends, we will remember him. When we are weary and in need of strength, we will remember him. When we are lost and sick at heart, we will remember him. When we have joys we yearn to share, we will remember him. So long as we live, he too will live, for he is now a part of us, as we remember Alan Krause. To you, Karen, to your children, to Philip, Laura, and David, and also to Tomaka, Niall, and Lori, and to his grandchildren, to Hannah, Kenny, Jacob, Connor, and Rory, to all the members of the family, to so many dear friends who are here in person, to those of you who join us via live stream. Our hearts are joined together today as we remember, but also as we celebrate the life of your beloved Alan. Our sages, in their wisdom, have taught us that birth is a beginning, and death a destination, and life is a journey. Life is a journey from childhood to maturity and from youth to age, from innocence to awareness and ignorance to knowing, from foolishness to discretion and then perhaps to wisdom, from weakness to strength or strength to weakness and often back again, from health to sickness and back we pray to health again, from offense to forgiveness, from loneliness to love, from joy to gratitude, from pain to compassion, and from grief to understanding, from fear to faith, from defeat to defeat to defeat, until looking backward or ahead, we see that victory lies not at some high place along the way, but in having made the journey, stage by stage, a sacred pilgrimage. Birth is a beginning and death a destination, and life is a journey, a sacred pilgrimage to life everlasting. Alan's journey, a journey of more than 94 years, began here in Cleveland. He was born on August 17, 1929, to Pearl and Henry Krause. Alan, along with his older brother Harold of blessed memory, grew up initially in Cleveland Heights and then Shaker Heights. In his youth and teen years, Alan was a bit mischievous. He was always curious. His daughter Laura shared with me if young Alan Krause, and actually even older Alan Krause, but if young Alan saw a sign on a door that said, "Verboten, keep out, or do not enter," to Alan this actually meant, "Welcome," or "Come on in." Alan's curiosity proved to be one of his greatest traits, and this curiosity served him well as he journeyed through life. His boyhood curiosity guided his parents to send Alan to boarding school. As a student, he attended Western Reserve Academy, and Alan thrived both academically and also as a valued member of their swim team, where he specialized in the backstroke. He went on to attend Cornell University, where he earned his undergraduate degree in economics and also his master's degree in business. And Alan served our country during the Korean War, stationed in Paris, France, as a quartermaster in the United States Army. Upon his return home, he began working both in real estate and liquidation. And in 1967, Alan founded Mid-America Management Corporation. Now, for Alan, this was not simply a business or his career. It was his passion. It was his vocation and also his avocation. Karen, somewhere in the mid-70s, you and Alan were fixed up by friends. And that first date turned out to be an evening at the Front Row Theater, followed by dinner at the Inner Circle. A courtship ensued, and love blossomed. And the two of you married on December 24th, 1978, a date that coincided actually with the first night of Hanukkah that year. Karen, in the Jewish wedding ceremony, there's a moment known as the Sheva Brachot, the 7 wedding blessings. It's this moment when the bride and groom share the cup of wine for the second time. And within these 7 blessings, the bride and groom are referred to by the Hebrew phrase Re'im Ahuvim, which literally translated means loving partners or beloved friends. And Karen, this is what you and Alan were throughout your 45 years of marriage. Loving partners and beloved friends. As the two of you journeyed through life together, so too you journeyed the world together with amazing travels and adventures. There were the cruises and the travels through Europe. Alan, who was also fluent in French, he especially loved France, and this maybe came from his time serving in the army. He so loved France that twice a year a big crate would arrive at your home, and the outside of the crate was marked medical supplies. The inside of the crate was filled with French wine. Karen, for you and Alan, your favorite place to be, though, was New York City. Alan adored New York. He loved musical theater, and the two of you would travel there to enjoy Broadway shows or just to walk the city. He really loved walking and exploring the Big Apple. And Alan's favorite song, of course, New York, New York. You and Alan were always blessed with wonderful friends with whom you'd enjoy dining out or going dancing. And Alan, you may not know, was an excellent dancer. He could jitterbug with the rest of them, and the best of them. He was an avid golfer, and he would fly out to Palm Springs every year and play in the Bob Hope Classic. And he so enjoyed golfing at Oakwood. Karen, you shared that while you may not have been a golfer, you were an excellent audience for Alan. You told me that when the two of you were dating, he was playing in a golf tournament at Oakwood, and you would proudly watch until the announcer said over the PA system, "Will the woman standing in the sand trap please move?" And that's when you learned what a sand trap was. Karen, you knew a man who was brilliant in business, but you also knew a man, a husband, a loving partner, who was romantic and kind. A man who demonstrated this quiet strength. A man who was loyal to you and to the family and to his friends. And you and your children knew a man who was generous. And there was the generosity that was known, of course, by our community. His commitment and generosity to the Temple Tifereth Israel, where Alan served as president from 1992 to 1995. His commitment and generosity to the Jewish Federation of Cleveland, where Alan took on many leadership roles. His commitment and generosity to many institutions and charitable foundations. But what you, Karen, and your family came to understand was Alan's quiet generosity. I don't know if many of the people in the room even know about it because it was done quietly. Maimonides teaches us about the 8 levels of giving tzedakah, charity. And among the highest levels include giving to those in need without being asked, or giving to those in a way that the recipient is unaware of the source. This mitzvah of giving quietly, without recognition, is truly an extraordinary mitzvah. And Alan lived this. And Karen, you gave him the greatest gift of all. It was perhaps his most precious and treasured gift, and that was the gift of a family. Laura, you shared with me that for you and for your brothers, Philip and David, you shared that while Alan was not your father, you shared he was your dad. And as your dad, Alan was, as you and your mom both said, all in. He was a dad, a friend, an advisor, a confidant. He was all in when it came to going to school conferences, carpooling for skiing times, and schlepping you all to Sunday school. If the 3 of you, or anyone for that matter, if you were in trouble, you called Alan. In Alan, you knew a man who instilled in you a curiosity of the world. Alan, in his younger years, attended summer camp in Maine, and so he made sure that the 3 of you and now the grandchildren all had the opportunity to experience Kennebunkport each and every summer. And there was the trip that Alan took with David and Philip to Southeast Asia, and the trip to the Galapagos Islands in Ecuador that Alan, by himself, took 4 of the 5 grandchildren. And of course, the amazing trip with the entire family, children and grandchildren, to Botswana and South Africa. He truly showed you the world. And speaking of being a grandfather, his 5 grandchildren were the jewels in his crown. He so adored Hannah, Kenny, Jacob, Connor, and Rory. In mentioning Alan's family, there's 2 people that I have been asked to mention. First, to Elazit, the family absolutely treasures you. You sit with the family today. You are a trusted friend, and for Karen and Alan, an adopted daughter. And especially these past 2 years, your love and care has been a precious gift to Alan, to Karen, and to the entire family. And Mark, forgive me, Mark, I don't know where you're seated, Mark. I know that you got your start with Alan when you were basically a kid, just 28 years old. Mark, we won't review the whole history, but I will share with you that the family is so touched by your visits these past 2 years, especially your regular visits to Alan. And every time, Mark, you would walk into the room, he would light up. He would pepper you with questions and say, "What's in the pipeline?" Alan treasured these visits, Mark. He loved talking with you about the business, the strategies, the intricacies. He loved these visits, and Mark, you know he truly loved you. Another person that Alan had a great respect and love was for Rabbi Richard Block, our senior Rabbi Emeritus at the Temple Tifereth Israel. Rabbi Block sent words of gratitude about his friend Alan in hopes that I would share them with you today. And he wrote the following. Rabbi Block says, Psalm 90 teaches that a normative human lifespan is 80 years and 10, or by reason of strength 80 years. Alan lived to be 80 years and 14. He was strong indeed in business, in public and private philanthropy, and above all in his love and devotion to Karen and their children and grandchildren. He was strong-minded and strong-willed, but also had a softer side and a kind and generous heart. The temple meant a great deal to Alan, and he to the temple, and his deep loyalty and commitment endured long after he served as our president. As senior rabbi, I benefited from his wisdom, guidance, experience, and steadfast support. I looked to him for sage, unvarnished advice, and not infrequently for help in both good times and challenging ones. Alan's extraordinary generosity to the temple came without expectation of recognition, reflecting selflessness, modesty, and perhaps even innate shyness. Alan was more than an indispensable partner in my sacred endeavors. He became a dear and cherished friend. Susie and I greatly enjoyed his and Karen's company, and we deeply appreciate their gracious hospitality. It boils down to this. I loved Alan, and I will always remember him with boundless gratitude and admiration. Zecher Tzadik Livracha. May his memory be an enduring blessing. I know that Rabbi Block and his wife Susie are joining us from California via live stream, and thank you, Rabbi, for your beautiful words. In discussing the concept of sharing words, our tradition has taught us that words which come from the heart enter directly to the heart. And so at this time, I would like to call on his son, David, who has words in his heart to share with us today.
A man sees things differently at different times of his life. This line from the movie Big Fish captures how I've been reflecting upon Alan. I've spent most of the last 3 years living in Cleveland, sharing more time with my mom and Alan than in many previous years. Seeing and appreciating Alan's determination, perseverance, and resilience was not new, but watching him in his 90s, facing increasing health challenges, was something extraordinary to behold. Alan simply willed himself to continue experiencing life. You only come around this way once, he used to say. Alan was game for all that life offered, including becoming a first-time parent at 49 years old to Philip, Laura, and myself. We were 14, 12, and 9. It was lucky for us that we didn't come with warning labels, but even with a warning about the hazards of teenagers, Alan would not have been deterred. He wanted to be a parent. So with the same oh boy attitude he brought to everything he did, Alan jumped into the world of carpooling, parent-teacher conferences, bar and bat mitzvahs, family vacations, graduations, weddings, and births. Alan was a father to us in every way throughout our lives. He even persuaded my mom to get a dog, Mikey and then Max, the standard poodles. We're the first two in what became a lifelong love affair for each of us with our dogs. My mom, Philip, Laura, and I happily will show you more dog pictures than you ever dreamed possible. Alan instilled in us a strong sense of personal responsibility, the hard way. Each of us remembers being woken up during the night to turn the lights off, which we had lazily ignored. I remember thinking, really? You came all this way between the two farthest points in the house and are standing at the light switch. Just turn the lights off. There is no reason for us both to be awake at this hour. Needless to say, the grandchildren were born turning the lights off. Beyond such life lessons, Alan instilled his endless curiosity and fearlessness in us. We've traveled the world as a family and individually. Philip lives in Tokyo, Laura lives in Ireland, and myself first in Seattle and now in Canada. It was Alan who taught us to spread our wings, but always to remember home. I had the privilege of traveling with Alan to Vietnam, Jordan, Lebanon, and Syria, as Philip had done with Alan to India several years earlier. His energy was boundless. I barely could keep up. Alan would ask every guide about population numbers, the local economy, and about his or her personal life. Are you married? Kids? Other jobs? And as Philip recalls from India, sure, we'll visit your family. Alan, we're in Damascus, Syria, by ourselves. Zip it. And of course, Alan was always suggesting to drivers to park in non-existent parking spaces with horizontal yellow lines or no lines at all, as Alan himself loved to do. There were other amazing trips, too many in fact to recount, but I will never forget three in particular. To celebrate Alan's 80th birthday, I planned a trip for the two of us to Cropreddy and Banbury, England, where Jensens are restored or rebuilt under the tutelage of former Jensen factory workers. Alan had owned two Jensens when we were kids. He loved those cars, and we lived in fear of scratching or denting them. Laura claims she still has nightmares about once driving one in high school and then not being able to start the car to drive home. Alan never told her the car started in neutral and not in park. Anyway, my plan for our trip was for Alan to test drive a rebuilt high-tech Jensen with all the bells and whistles. Unfortunately, the only car available on that day was a right-side drive Interceptor R with more than 500 horsepower and a price tag north of $400,000. Alan was gung-ho. Delighted with himself, he reminded me that during his Army service, he drove all over France with his golf clubs. Somehow that was not enough to convince me to give him the keys, to drive a rocket car down a narrow country road framed by cows. Instead, I drove the car with Alan riding shotgun and the salesman in the back seat. Alan loved it. A few years later, I traveled to Rwanda with my mom, Lori, and Alan for guerrilla trekking through bamboo forests. As Lori reminded me this week, we trekked for hours, not once, but twice, 2 days in a row. It was arduous. We had fire ants in our boots. Alan was in his 80s and was willing to be carried up and back by trackers in order to have the experience. Carried by 4 trackers in an armchair, a makeshift chariot, like a fabled emperor on his way to battle. That spirit was quintessentially Alan. But wait, Alan was far from done. He celebrated his 90th birthday with the entire family on safari in Botswana. Seriously, would any other person at 90 even consider daily 5 a.m. game drives on teeth-rattling dirt roads, chilled to the bone? But Alan loved Africa, the adventure, and sharing the experience with his whole family. So back where I began. A man sees things differently at different times of his life. Everything that I've mentioned today was memorable at the time, but seemed isolated events. Now, I appreciate the consistent threads of Alan's remarkable journey. I had not stopped before to recognize these threads, their depth and enduring strength, until I witnessed them again and again in these last few years of ill health. If I could point out to Alan all the manifestations of his lifelong indomitable spirit, he would no doubt smile with one of his favorite lines and say, "What do you think of that?" Leonard Cohen sang, "There is a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in." Perhaps death, like every transition, is simply a crack in the human journey. Whatever it is, we each carry a bit of Alan's light and love and fortitude within us. He lives on through each and every life he touched.
Thank you, David. I'd also like to call on two of his grandchildren, Hannah and Jacob.
As children, we came to see our grandfather, affectionately known to us as Papa, most vividly during our summers spent in Kennebunkport, Maine. Every summer, the family would converge in the Colony Hotel, much as it had during our parents' childhood, for swimming, lobster, and most importantly, time together. Our grandfather, always an avid swimmer, could often be found by the pool, ready to throw one of us in with a splash. Some of my earliest memories are of being picked up and hurled into the water by him. Perhaps vaguely aware of our grandfather's proclivity for swimming, we would insist that when playing, Papa could do it best. While we know now, looking back, that such practices were likely not advanced training on the Western Reserve Academy or Cornell swim teams, we can see that indeed Papa did do it best because of his love of fun and excitement, and importantly, his love for us. When not swimming with us, he would routinely take us out for a mid-afternoon walk around the town. However, these ought not to be mistaken for leisurely strolls. Ever the pragmatist, when there were errands to be done, Papa would be sure to attend to business. So much so that one year, when Hannah was still in a stroller, our grandfather unceremoniously parked her outside the post office, unattended, before going in to send his packages. Fortunately, nothing happened, and Hannah was recovered safely, or so we assume. Nonetheless, he came home with the child, and when reminded of the danger, gave an unconcerned shrug. No trip to Maine was ever complete with not one, but several trips to Mabel's, my grandfather's lobster shack of choice. Those that knew him know that our grandfather loved his food, but that lobster inspired a zealousness that few other meals could challenge. We were fortunate enough to share in his almost ceremonial donning of the lobster bib, before he would, with few qualms about company, dig into the sizable shellfish that would appear in front of him. Those that felt that they had perhaps not seen enough of the ocean need not worry come dinner time. A seat next to Papa was enough to guarantee plenty of exposure to seawater, with maybe a healthy dose of lobster juice. As came to be a rite of passage, the newest member of the family that summer would often be goaded into sitting next to Papa, usually none the wiser, although our collective chuckling may have often given the game away. More often than not, they took it with good spirit, and those that didn't usually didn't make it back.
More recently, the grandchildren together traveled with Papa Allen to the Galapagos Islands. The journey was an undertaking for us, then still teenagers, but our grandfather, then in his 80s, took it in stride. Despite his octogenarian status, he would routinely be gathering the troops for another foray onto land to see the different animals. Needless to say, we were all quick to note that were we to ever run into trouble with a herd of seals, perhaps our grandfather, at times, mirroring his finned interlocutors with a measured approach and firm but friendly bark, would be as good an envoy as any. In a moment that now lives in family lore, when we were booted from our flights back home from Quito, Ecuador, our grandfather simply shrugged his shoulders and walked out of the airport. What then inspired a panic in us less seasoned travelers, we had, in our conception of things, just been stranded in a country where none of us spoke the language. Now appears to us a totem as one of our grandfather's best qualities. That there was always another adventure to be had, and each challenge became simply another act to what was sure to become a good story. While our grandfather is well remembered in these touching vignettes, they paint the picture of a man who is, yes, curious and trailblazing, but who always enjoyed these pursuits most when in good company. Indeed, the Papa Allen who would excitedly throw us into the pool in Maine is also remembered as a sage grandfather, no matter where we were, encouraging, frank when necessary, but always thoughtful and wise. We feel lucky to have not only been the beneficiary of some of this hard-earned knowledge, some of which we reference daily, but to be able to continue passing it along to those who might use it. In this vein, his summers in Kennebunkport may not have drawn to a close, but he stays with us always.
Thank you, Jacob and Hannah. David, you quoted Leonard Cohen. And that's interesting in that Karen mentioned to me a special and favorite Leonard Cohen melody. And so I wish to share with you now the words of the 150th Psalm set to the music of Leonard Cohen. And if you feel so moved to join me, you'll know when. I invite you to do so. Hallelu el bekodsho, Hallelu birkia uzo, Hallelu bigvurotav. Hallelu kirov gudlo, Hallelu biteka shofar, Hallelu benavel vichinor. Hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. Hallelu betofu machol, Hallelu beminim ve'ugav, Hallelu bitziltzilei shama. Hallelu bitziltzilei trua, kol hanshama tichaleya. Hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Zichron livracha. May the memory of Alan Krause always be a blessing. Just a few short announcements before we conclude our service. I've been asked to share with you that if anyone wishes to make a contribution in memory of Alan, the family has suggested perhaps you consider the American Cancer Society or, of course, a charity of your choice. Following our service here, we will be processing to the Bet Olam Cemetery, and following the internment, the family will be receiving visitors at 3 Village in Lyndhurst until 5 p.m. today. Alan's name will be read at the Temple Tifereth Israel prior to the recitation of the Mourner's Kaddish, beginning this Friday night and continuing for 3 Fridays after that. The services are at 6 p.m. and everyone is welcome to join us. Friends, at this time, as you are able, I invite you to rise for the El Maleh, the memorial prayer. El Maleh Rachamim, Shochen Bamromim, Hamsemenu Chanechona, Tachat Kanfech Hashchina, B'malot Kedoshim Otorim, Ki Zohar Raki Amazhirim, Et Nishmati Akirenu, Shel Halach Le'olamo, Began Eden Techemenu Chato, Ana B'harachamim Astirechu B'seter Knafecha Le'olamim, V'titzuror B'tzuror HaChaim Et Nishmato, Adonai hu nechalato v'yanuach b'shalom al mishkavo v'nomar Amen. O merciful God, who dwells on high, who is full of compassion, grant perfect peace beneath the shelter of your divine presence among the holy. To the pure, who shine as the brightness of the firmament, and to our dear departed, to Alan, who has gone to his eternal home, may his soul be bound up in the bonds of eternal life, and grant that his memory inspire all of us to noble and consecrated living. And to this we say, Amen. Please be seated. This concludes our service here. As you have come here today in peace, so may you go forth in peace.
Once the pallbearers have their coat, we'll step forward. Those are our pallbearers. We'll get the coat. Pallbearers, once you have your coat, you just step forward here. Pallbearers, you step forward. We'll go with that gentleman right there. Can I ask people to rise, please? The interment will be at the Battle of Cemetery. We ask that friends who are going to that service, please return directly to your cars. Put on your hazard lights and your headlights. On behalf of the family, thank you for coming.